We're glad to be here live with you. And Carl, glad to be back with you. It's been a
Glad
while.
to be here.
We got a chance to sit down with Carl as one of our guests in an event we had a long time back. And we said, man, we got to connect with Carl again because it was a great, great conversation. We just kind of got to the tip of it. And today we want to just dive in deeper just with you. And so it's an honor for you to share your time with us and with our guest online here to talk about dispelling myths of automation in manufacturing. And we're going to dive right in. There's 4 big myths that we're going to cover today. And so when we get to analyzing, how do we automate things? How do we make things better? There's these overarching 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, whatever you want to call them, that people in manufacturing often say, I'm worried about addressing and implementing automation, specifically in my manufacturing operation, because I don't want it to cost jobs. I mean, let's just take the 300-pound gorilla, open the door, and get him out here today and
shove
toss
him
it
out
out
in the
here
front.
because these people matter to us. They matter to our organization. We're afraid if we implement automation, it's going to cost jobs. Carl, you've been a part of manufacturing. Is that true or is it not true? And tell us your thoughts.
Yeah, so one, that's a very unique way of describing these myths. Some of them, maybe they are quite that severe, but hopefully I think we can kind of maybe make them a little less scary than the 4 horsemen. I think there's a couple tactical ways that you can at least increase your odds of kind of getting through some of them. How you choose to approach them, I think actually will be a big indicator of the success you have on actually dispelling that myth within your organization. One of the biggest, I think, which a lot trickled down from it, is the robots are here to take my job.
Yep.
I think that's been the case from when robots entered the scene, however many couple decades
20, 30 years ago.
I mean, when it really started entering, that was the thing. iRobot movies came out and you're like, oh yeah, they're definitely here. But really the way that I think about robots too is I don't think that they're taking jobs. I really look at them as taking tasks.
Okay.
That I've used that saying before. I really try when I'm telling folks about why are we adding automation and stuff. It's really about removing tasks. When you look at robots and you're deciding on which robot is right for your application, which obviously there's a slew of applications and what's right for you is going to change what's right for me and so on. And you look at, well, is a robot by itself the right decision? Is it a cobot? And while robot and cobots are actually descriptions of automation solutions, technically by definition, a cobot means there still has to be some human interaction. Yep. Well, in the way I view it is I think every robot's a cobot. There are very, very few applications that you literally just stick a robot in and that's it, right? It does it all. It's just unrealistic. There's still some human interaction with it. And so when we've in the past through multiple careers and multiple jobs, multiple solutions, we're really looking at how do we bring in automation to work alongside our folks to give them the tools they need to be successful.
Right.
When you position it that way, obviously folks are going to be more susceptible to it. You can't just position it that way and then turn around and actually use them to replace jobs. But when you position it that way and people kind of look at it through that light, one, the acceptance within the manufacturing facility is going to be significantly higher. But I also think you get actually a better solution because robots have their strengths and weaknesses, just like us as people, we have our strengths and weaknesses. And when you can kind of pair them alongside each other and kind of actually try to leverage the best of both worlds, that's when you're really onto something.
Yeah.
So I think that's really, really important is how you approach that with your folks, but the strategy that you take on trying to find the right solution. If you're viewing it through that, how do I replace those tasks and let my people work on the things that I need them to work on and let the automation take some of the maybe more ergonomically unfriendly, the super repeatable, low thought process the boring jobs. I mean, that's the stuff that...
Let me get rid of that.
Oh, for sure.
Who doesn't want that?
Well, and then you talk about buy-in from your folks too. I mean, I'll be glad to give that stuff away. I mean, I look back at, a dishwasher as a form of automation.
100%.
And it's like, we didn't just, now you don't have to ever load it or unload it. You're still loading and unloading it, but you're not doing the scrubbing. And that mentality, I think, is super important. The only I guess a little caveat or add on to that too is that there's got to be some recognition that robots do need to, I'll say replace jobs, but it's really fill openings.
That's what I was going to
Because
say. Yep.
yeah, when you look at the manufacturing, I think the last number I saw that by year 2030, I think manufacturers are going to be about 4 million people short. I think that's the last number I heard. And so when you think of that, it's like, we can't find enough people now as it is, let alone if you take another 4 million people out of the workforce. And so there's got to be some recognition of that. But I really think that the right strategy and what you've seen way more accepted nowadays too, it's bringing robots alongside people, replace tasks, not jobs, give them the tools to be more successful. And then there's a slew of benefits that come through that.
Yeah, and you're mentioning robots specifically, but I think of automation replacing jobs. You could take that into the data world too and say, hey, there's a person sitting here implementing all this mundane, worthless, mindless, not worthless, very important data, but not enjoyable task.
Not a very fulfilling job.
Not very fulfilling.
Right.
If you're a forecasting person in a factory and you literally spend your day extracting data from one source and another source, trying to figure this all out and see where things are and look for trends, your life just got a whole lot better when you can automate those tools and make data flow better. So it's not just robots. There's lots of other places, but I think you hit the nail on the head. It's not taking jobs away.
Oh, no.
It's literally, we're trying to keep the manufacturing facility producing at an adequate level to compete and get stuff out the door. I always say that if you don't ship work, I call it shipping work. If you don't ship work every single day, or not in most cases every day, you can't pay the bills.
Right.
And in a factory position, again, I worked at Caterpillar and I saw this. If you have a piece of the line where someone's assembling something, that person's not there, there's no cross training.
Oh, yeah.
It's a big time problem.
Huge problem.
Huge, right?
Yep.
So I really think that it's not a lost job. I think you nailed it on the head. We're helping fill roles that we just can't find people that want to work for.
Well, and you actually brought up another good point, the word cross training.
Yeah.
So when you layer in how do you take these jobs or these robots to replace tasks, you're freeing up your folks to do more valuable work, one of which absolutely can be cross training.
Yeah.
And that is a huge impact for one, their job satisfaction, job fulfillment, quality of life, all those things. But then the flexibility that the manufacturing system gains, because you've actually afforded yourself the luxury of pulling this person off this task, that you can't leave this cell all day or else instantly everything stops. You put a robot to work beside them and maybe they can go cross-train in a neighboring cell. The line's still running and now you're training on the job. I mean, just again, all the benefits. I think it's the strategy you take and how you want to implement and how you do that. Folks will buy into it. That's going to make or break everything.
I agree.
But it's over and over and over again. If you approach it as replacing tasks, not jobs, you're going to be successful with it for sure.
Well, let's go to the second one. It's just as big as lost jobs maybe, and that is it's expensive. It's a big price tag. I do not want to attach it. I don't want to attack it. Walk me through how you have analyzed the ROI, whether that be, and again, I'll just go back to something we're passionate about as well in automation is data, right?
Right.
We talk about Power BI and being able to help people see things and make real-time decisions. But often when those projects come online, people go, I don't want to spend it because we've tried that before, it didn't work. I'm sure the same was true with automation tools. And they looked at the ROI and they said, I don't know if we can do that. So how did you approach that in your view?
Yeah, so I've got a couple different scenarios, and I think everybody is going to have probably a range of them as well, too. I think understanding what expensive is obviously is different.
Yep.
Well, nowadays, everything's expensive. I mean, it's crazy what things cost everywhere in the world right now. But to smaller organizations, the affordability is going to be a lot different than places like Caterpillar or
Sure.
$500 million facilities. So I think that there's defining what expensive is important, just because you've got to know what your limits are. You can't just go and ask for the world and expect to get it and not have done your due diligence.
Sure.
So I think when you look at implementation of automation, it's a journey. And the data part, I think, is one of those, like, we talk about robots as automation, like I physically want to see a robot moving and stuff, but it goes far beyond that. The data is just as important of that, but that's all part of the journey. And so I think where you are in your journey is going to make a big difference. When I first started, I think one of the first robots I was looking at, or automation that I was looking at, really wasn't even a robot back then. I think it was like $10,000. And a little bit was, I kind of approached it as a little bit of a proof of concept. Like, will this work? The ROI calculations that I did, very small scale, very low risk, easier to ask for some smaller dollar amounts, kind of vet these things out and show them that, okay, this solution does work. And then you can kind of start scaling it. But I kind of had to make the money back to be able to say, okay, go put this in my bank. So when I ask again, because it's just, business has got to have money. They got to have money, and we can't be spending money on stuff like this that isn't going to have a return. So ROI is important, but understanding what your available cash up front, if you will, is super important. The cost of capital right now, it's really expensive. So that definitely changes some of the dynamics, some of the ROIs that may have made sense a couple years ago. They don't make sense today. Whether they make sense in a couple years, everyone's situation is different. But I've been part of some really small projects, and I've been part of some mammoth projects. The mammoth projects, while they come across as maybe a little bit sexier, a lot more eyeballs, a lot more moving parts, I don't know that I would say that they are on an exponential scale that much more effective. Some of the smaller projects that we've done have been just infinitely successful. Like, it's crazy how successful just some of those small ones. You don't always have to hit the home runs. Base hits wins a lot of ball games.
That's Moneyball.
I mean, it really is. I mean, they made a whole movie about it.
Moneyball.
And so I mean, it's easy to get wrapped up in. I need this big, glamorous, huge automated cell. And sometimes that's right for your application. And like I said, I've been part of those. They work really great. It's awesome. You take a bunch of pictures. The plant gets excited about it. But some of the little nuanced, kind of smaller solutions, I don't overlook those. It's easy to overlook those. It's easy to, what's the big numbers? It makes my ROI make sense more, but they don't always have to be super expensive.
You bring up a great point. I'll bring this back to, for us, we had a kind of an aha moment and I'll go back in time with Classy. Traditionally an e-commerce implementer of big complex e-commerce sites. When we started seeing, what clients wanted, they want the moon. Right.
Oh,
and
right.
the stars and the sky. And then we would say, hey, you've got all of these wishes that you want. We can do that, but this is the kind of money it's going to take. And if you want to do it in this amount of time, then people go, oh, okay, let's back up here. So we go, let's get this business making money with this. And let's do it what we call the phased approach, right? Or staged approach, however you want to look at it. But we would look at a phased approach and go, let's get this implemented, get it generating revenue. Then we will, and then we've been able to build and build and build on that. And when it works, the ask for money the second time and the third time gets way easier because
for sure.
People just look. I remember the first time I ever went, when I was a little kid, I went to ask for a loan for a combine farming, and I had to beg the banker, and I paid it off in 2 days, cutting 2 fields. And I walked in and he says, what are you here to do? I said, I'm here to pay off that note. And he fell over, right? And he was like, are you sure you want to do that? I said, oh yeah, I do actually. But next year when I went in, I said, I want to expand my fleet. He goes, whatever you want.
Whatever you need.
And I think that's the same way in corporations too. If you have an idea and you've proven, I always think about the quadrant of cost of real funds, right? Cost of time, and then the implementation ROI factor. Those 3 factors on a quadrant, right? If you look at where that spot's at, what you said earlier was so key. It's like, hey, where's the low-hanging fruit? Where's the base hit? This tool right here would only cost me $10,000 and pays itself off, like I talked about that combine
2
story,
days.
pays
There you
itself
go.
off in 10 days. That's a no-brainer, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we see the $500,000, the $1 million price tags, and sometimes those make sense over. But if you're a small business or a medium-sized business and you go, I don't want to have to borrow money, I want to cash flow my. We have clients like that.
Yeah.
Then it doesn't always have to be the biggest one first.
Well, and also too, when you look at the implementation cost,
Yeah.
too, you typically just look at what does this robot cost me?
Yeah.
What's it going to pay for? But the time taken
Time
to
of the
stand
people,
that
that's
up
right. It's
is
so
huge.
big.
And if you're busy,
so big.
oftentimes like I'm too busy to stop and implement this. And sometimes those small ones will get you some of those efficiency wins quick to get you a little bit of breathing room, to get you a little credit with the banker to say, okay, look, I've shown these 5-6 times while they're smaller, but they've been winners. Now let's step up and swing a little harder. And so, I just, it's a journey. You can't expect to go from A to Z overnight. And there's nothing wrong with just those crawl before you walk mentality. Just start knocking out that low hanging fruit and let that momentum build. And then when you get that tailwind behind you, go for those big projects. And then it's super awesome to see those implemented and see what they accomplish.
Well, let's go on to number 3, which is the third myth, lack of skill. My organization doesn't have the skill to pull this off. It's too technical. It's too advanced. I'm just an old country boy and I can't really implement that thing, man. I just work here. How do you dispel that myth? Because again, we're talking about robots. We're talking about sci-fi AI. We're talking about all this kind of stuff. But in the end of the day, it isn't as big of a skill need sometimes as people think. I mean, these implementation tools are made nowadays for like, you can't mess it up.
Well, I mean, it's crazy. You look at when you first got your cell phone, and I've got a 5-year-old daughter that I swear runs a cell phone better than I do. And
my 2-year-old used to run the iPhone. I know. Like, what's going on? That's the level that they built it at.
But it's so true. The incoming generation, they're born with that stuff in their hands. It's at their fingertips constantly. The way the HMIs are set up nowadays, I mean, it's...
When you say HMIs... Did you say HMIs?
Yeah, so human machine interface.
There you go.
Yeah, so the control panel. Sorry. Sorry. Yep, the control panel.
Just making sure everybody knows.
Yeah, I mean, back in the day,
jargon and people go, I don't know what he just said.
No, my apologies.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Back one of my first jobs, I was programming a CNC machine using old G code.
Yeah.
You brought that in today? Ooh. Sure. I think this myth is a little bit more real than what it is today. But today, I mean, it's you drag a circle here, you draw a square here, you hit go, the code spits out, the machine does it. I mean, it's just, they've become so user friendly. It's the lack of skill, I think, is actually one of the easier myths to dispel. I really do. I think when you look at the generation of folks coming in, they're just better at that stuff. They're more excited about it. They eat, sleep, breathe technology nowadays. I mean, it's just in our face all day, every day, whether we like it or not. It could be a bad thing. That's a whole nother discussion. But it's at our fingertips for literally everything we do. It's just second nature. And then you couple that with just the technological advances that we've made as a country. The machine manufacturers, they know the people that are running them. They take the feedback from the companies.
Make it easy.
It is. I mean, it's just really foolproof. Which, as manufacturers, that's what we want.
Yes.
We want this program to be able to be made so we can't mess it up.
That's it.
And they'll customize it to do that. But just the interface and what you can do with them nowadays, it's hard to find a solution where you don't have anybody in your facility that doesn't know how to run that. Maybe there's some really specialized that is some weird outlier, but by far and away,
maybe an old tool.
Maybe. But with all the new technologies and stuff, and then the other thing that I would say is the training. The technological advances in the training aspect have come along at just the same rate. That getting trainings isn't like,
it's on site.
I bought this European machine. I got to send all my people to Europe now. It's all online. On YouTube or TikTok or whatever. I mean, it's just it's all right there, and so it's just so much easier for current folks. But I really lean into when you look at that new wave coming in, which is what we've got to be looking at. We've got to have that forward vision and see who are the folks that are going to be coming in, they're going to be running this equipment. They've got it. They can run it better than you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy how many. I've done a lot of tours with middle school and high school kids. A lot of it is around. I've got a passion to make sure younger folks nowadays are excited about getting into industry, manufacturing, industrial trades, you name, like we've got to get more folks into that. And so we've done a lot of tours, a lot of middle school and high schoolers. So, hey, as you're thinking about your career path, it's not what it used to be. It's a lot cleaner. There's a lot more cool stuff. There's a lot more robots. And it's amazing how many times the first thing they'll gravitate to is right to the control panel.
Oh, yeah.
Can I press buttons? And we're like, yeah, that's fine. And they start pressing it. And that right there, you see, it's like, oh yeah, they already know how to run it. And so when you want that confirmation of, is there a skill? No, there's plenty of it out there. A lot of times you just haven't given folks an outlet, if you will, to show that skill.
That's a great point. And we'll move on to the final one, which is the fourth one, the fear of change. Now, this can be multifaceted. This could be from the employees. This could be from the managers. This could be from leadership. There's oftentimes, there's oftentimes, hey, everyone's afraid. We've got a machine, it's working. We've got a person, it's working. We've got a process. We know our costs. We know our outputs. Man, if we implement this automation, it could mess it all up. It could really throw things off. And that fear of change is real. It's palatable, right? What's your take on that? And because my feeling is oftentimes people don't understand the cost of not changing, right? They don't understand what's their current loss in production, their current loss of product, their current loss of insight, inventory cost, everything. We get interest cost. They don't understand that by not automating things, what they're missing. Do you agree?
Yep. Yeah, I think so. As humans, we can say we love change. We don't. It's it's ingrained in us is that we do not like change.
Yeah.
So getting past that, while it is a myth of automation, it's just in everything that we do.
Well, I always hear this. This is a funny phrase. People don't mind change as long as it doesn't.
Well, that's true. That's
like,
so true.
You can change all you want, but I don't want to change.
Just stay out of my bubble, right?
Stay out of my bubble. That's really what we're talking about.
And while it's uncomfortable, it really is a necessary evil. I mean, there is example after example of I don't want to change, and in the blink of an eye, you're left behind. I mean, what Blockbuster may still go down as arguably one of the streaming DVD. Nope, we're going to stay in our way, and just went from the top to bottom in just what felt like days.
Yeah, it was.
And that was out of a fear of change.
Yeah.
And so while there are unknowns with, well, if I change this, I might mess it up, I think that the opposite of that is worse.
Yeah.
The fallout of not changing far outweighs some of those risks, because so many of those risks, you're kind of most of the time playing worst case scenarios.
Yep.
And while we're, as humans, we're designed to, you want to plan for the worst and hope for the best. And that's part of manufacturing too. I think that's kind of more ingrained in us, but you've got to be willing to make the change. I think the other thing that holds people back a lot of times too is we think of, okay, maybe as managers, we're ready for change. Maybe as execs, we're ready for change. Maybe from the finance side, we've got all this signed up, but our folks on the floor aren't ready for change.
They're not there.
They're not there. And I think oftentimes, and I've done this myself too, and I'd go back and be like, I don't understand why they don't see it. I don't know if you read the book Switch, but it talks about the rider and the elephant. We go into that conversation with the rider's mentality, because all we've talked about so far is data, analytics, ROI, numbers, logic. I mean,
you forgot about the heart.
You got it. And we take that argument, we take that numbers argument out there, and it doesn't land, and we're amazed why.
Yeah.
When they have this idea that, this is going to cost me my job, and all these emotions that we talked about leading up until this point, you're fighting your workforce, if you will, because you're approaching the argument wrong. And so I think
you're approaching it from a logical perspective, but the truth is, as people people are emotional beings.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
We're having
Yep.
a logical experience on this earth, but we are emotional beings.
Yep.
We make decisions emotionally and justify logically. Marketers know that very well.
Absolutely.
So, and often you bring a great point here. Leaders often forget this great point. Vision leaks, and your vision will have to be continually said and redundantly promoted and ingrained until people are just as passionate about that vision of change in a positive way
Right.
as you are.
And when you accomplish that,
Yeah.
what's there to be scared of at that point?
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, like
Yeah.
that's the biggest thing is when that vision and people are behind it and everybody's marching in the right direction. Yep, we may have a quality process that gets changed, but I bet you've got a whole team of people that already know, well, if this happens, we'll do this, and if this happens, we'll do that. Like they've got that all figured out already before it even gets to that point. And so I think we just kind of create this myth that, oh, it's everybody else is going to be afraid of change, so I should be. But it's because we haven't clearly articulated what that strategy is, or we've done it in just a purely logical stance, and then nobody gets behind it, and then we're amazed why it doesn't happen. And I say that like I've been down that road. I've done that over and over again. And it just, once it finally clicks and you can kind of show the people the why, you can't just show the what, you've got to show the why. And while the logical part's important, again, we ROI and data, all those things are very important. That can't just be all it's about.
That's right.
And so I think when you can kind of match those two up together, that's when that change becomes a lot less scary. I understand the why. I understand what we're doing. I understand that vision. People will support what they help build. You get them behind it and then and get some of their input. Absolutely. Like you don't have to have all the answers. Go out there and say, what tools do you need to make your job easier? How can automation solve any of those problems? Can data solve any of those problems? And when you can kind of bring those two alongside each other, it doesn't need to be very scary. I mean, as humans, we're going to resist it. We're always going to resist it. But taking that edge off and just making it that sting a little less, that's when you're onto something.
So we've kind of hit these four things just head on, and we're going to switch now to Q&A, and I think we've got some great questions coming in. The first question I'm going to throw out here for you, if you're ready.
I'm ready.
There you go. All right. What's a good starting point for automation in my plant? Now, that's a generic question, so we don't know the context, right? We don't know what's going on, but how would you analyze that situation, not knowing anything about an organization or the plant that they're in? How would you go, hey, a good starting point is?
Well, the fact that they use the word starting point will at least imply that they've got little or no. I would say that's at the beginning of their automation journey. And I could be wrong, but if we start with that bit of context, I would again echo, start small. Don't bite off more than can you chew. It's again, how to eat an elephant one bite at a time. That is perfect for this as well. I would also completely encourage to go ask your folks on the floor, what are their ideas? What do they see that they're living every day? What are the pain points that automation could help? And while they may not have all the answers, nor would you necessarily expect them to, nor would they expect you to have all the answers, but that collaboration, that conversation, I think would be a great starting point. One, it could provide the solution, but two, it'll at least start that vision leak. Is we're looking at things to make this easier. We're looking at automation. People that may be, well, why are you looking to take jobs? That's a perfect way to get out in front of that conversation of, no, absolutely not. But we can't hire folks fast enough. We can't train folks fast enough. We've got this job that maybe it's a crappy job and we don't like to have you guys do that. And we're trying to make your work life better, whatever your situation is or whatever is driving you to look for automation. That's a perfect opportunity to have that conversation and let that spread like wildfire. But I would just caution, if you start small, you're not going to go wrong. You may run through that journey faster than others. But it's a journey. This is not a destination play. It's your path, and how you choose it is going to be up to you, but don't feel like you've got to go to A to Z overnight.
That's a great point. I want to recap some things he said. If you didn't get this, he said, hey, start with your floor. Go out and get feedback. What are What are the mundane tasks that no one wants to do anyways, or we can't hire people for this? Start there. Number 2, start small, right? Don't begin with a massive project. Get a quick win. And then number 3, recognize it's a journey, not a destination. We're going to start here and we're going to continue to improve. Okay, that's some great stuff. The next question we have is, how do I get my executive leadership on board? And I get this one a lot on every project we discuss. It's yeah. Oh, got to get my execs on board, right?
Yep.
So, usually, unless you're the owner, right, there's always somebody to
Always
answer
somebody.
to, right? So we could just say, boss. How do I get my boss on board? Where do you see when you cast the vision for automation, right, that you got buy-in? How did you do that?
Yeah. So very much to the rider and the elephant analogy and the mistakes that I had made, I oftentimes too went way too rider when you go up the chain, and then you just assume, oh, we live in numbers all day, every day. That's all they're gonna want. But as humans,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter what level we are. There's that
Yeah.
combination. So you just can't approach it strictly by the ROI, because there's a ton of ROI projects out there that make sense.
Oh, yeah.
Doesn't mean they're actually going to make sense in reality.
Nope.
And so you've got to have that blend. While I would say there's probably a little bit more rider than elephant, the higher up you go, just that's the nature of those positions. But I would say the biggest thing is you've got to clearly articulate the strategy, the why. Again, it goes back to the why. Is you want to put this automation in why. When you start having those conversations of, well, I went to the floor, we've done a full analysis, everybody agrees this is the job, or this one is a ergonomic pain point, we've had this many injuries. You start, well, that's got a little bit of rider, but the elephant in there too, I can't hire enough folks. I don't think that's a hard argument to me. I think everybody can make that one pretty easy right now. But all of this is in service of what? That's the biggest thing. It's like most companies have a pretty good grasp of where they are today, where point A is. Some have a better grasp of what point B looks like. Some maybe not so much, but if you don't, what does point B look like? At least as it's your individual journey, not the whole company's journey. But my vision is this level of automation. I'm not sure how I'm going to get there, but I need to start this, and then my path may divert, and we'll pick learnings up from that. And while here's the ROI and this looks good, but here's all the other stuff that goes with it. Here's the job satisfaction that I'm going to create,
There you go.
the tenure that I'm going to create, the driving down injuries, all those things, depending on what that situation, the quality improvements. Again, it depends on the solution. It depends on what you're going after, but there's so much more than just the ROI. Typically, that's the first thing they do. Oh, this payback meets the terms. That's what opens the door.
Sure.
But how do you stay part of that conversation? That's where it's got to be more than just the numbers. You've got to explain the why. And I think when they can start seeing the vision too, that's when you start getting that buy-in. And again, when it's smaller, it's a much easier conversation. You don't have to go and ask for the moon. Start for those small ones, show some of those easy wins, and then you're off and running.
We used to have a phrase, and I know it didn't come from Caterpillar, and I said it in our last webinar. At Caterpillar, we said, "In God we trust, and all others bring data." Right?
Yeah.
And I know that didn't originate at Caterpillar, but I do know that data is so important, and having ROIs is important. But the most important thing is that it ties to more than just ROI goals. It ties to safety goals. It ties to customer retention. We didn't talk about this. We think about work-life balance. That's a phrase we hear a lot. I think automation, to me, when you throw in automation and cross-training, now often you get in a factory situation, and you have multiple people working together, they often become friends. Well, they want to go vacation together. They can't.
Right. Yeah.
They can't leave at the same time. Why is that? Well, we don't have enough cross-training. We don't have enough employees. Automation could fix that, right? That leads to some true depth of friendships, relationships. Friends at work, people stay if they have a friend at work.
My gosh, it's crazy.
There's so many other things that are byproducts. So we're running out of time, so I want to get to these other questions. But the next question we have is, what are some examples of automation that resulted in clear ROIs? What are some that you think back of, you go, wow, this automation was easy because it, boom. And you obviously worked at a place that I know had some big ones. It was
Yeah. I
pretty
mean,
easy.
luckily, most of the projects that I was part of had pretty clear ROIs. I mean,
Yeah.
it was.
Give us just one in the essence of time.
Man, one of the easier ones that was just like a real quick, easy win. We had this process where we were loading the material by hand all day, every day. This was a 24/7 operation. We had 4 people in the cell picking up these 30-pound blocks, doing that all day, every day. I mean, it was in theory, I guess. I mean, they were doing that.
Strong.
Oh yeah, every one of them, we basically saved them a gym membership because that's all they did, 8 hours every day. And so it was actually a really tough role for us. One, you were just exhausted at the end of the day. I mean, just absolutely exhausted. Didn't matter how big you were. We had a lot of injuries in that role. When you're hiring folks, I mean, you're almost kind of forced into, can you do this all day? And it's just it's a slippery slope, and it was just not a good solution. It was just, we had to do something. That was one of those, the why was really, really pretty easy clear. Too. Yeah. And so we actually went and sourced this single articulating arm that picked up 4 of these stacks at once and loaded them on the conveyor at hand. So we took that 4-person operation and took it down to 1. Wow. So then that person became a machine operator where all they're doing is basically loading pallets in. It wasn't super complex, but it was, I think it was like $250,000 or something like that. I don't remember the exact dollar amount, but when you look at, I mean, 1 back injury. I mean, from a headcount reduction, we had, I think, 30 open roles at that time too. So we instantly took those 3 people from every shift. We went from 4 to 1, instantly plugged them into other roles, instantly drove capacity up. So, and I didn't even count all that ROI. I just looked at from 4 people to 1, and it was just a slam dunk. And it was one of those, went to the floor, and everyone pointed. I mean, the whole facility was like, that job. We hate that job. So it's perfect.
Don't want that one.
And again, we were really fortunate that the ROI was phenomenal on it as well. But I have a feeling there's plenty of those out there. The ones that are super crappy, you've had to put a lot of this or a lot of that or a lot of other stuff around it to kind of help stand that job up. That if you put some automation in, but it was it was less than a year payback. Injuries went literally to 0 on it. The job satisfaction went from just a real physical laborer to a machine operator. The job satisfaction, it was just, I mean, it was a slam dunk. And I love those. Those are ones that it's like, I just keep going back to that well over and over again because you just, it was phenomenal.
You got buy-in from the floor workers. And they're the ones that told you this.
They pointed to it. I mean, it was their idea.
That's easy. That actually answers one of our next questions was, how do you get buy-in from the floor workers? You just went and asked them. So, so I'll get to our last question here in the essence of time. What's an example of a project where you tried to automate it and it did not go well? It failed or went badly, or wasn't the ROI?
Yeah, so we had a solution, or what we thought was a solution. We had a problem. And we called a vendor in, and they proposed a solution. This was in our earlier days of our automation journey. We were newer with this. And when I look back at what went wrong, not really so much to how it went wrong, we were afraid to have anybody play devil's advocate, which I think was a big thing. We were so excited that we'd finally found an automation project that had the right ROI. We almost didn't care what the solution was. I mean, we were just so focused on, yes, we finally got one. We finally got corporate to approve. Bam, we finally won. And we took their solution. We didn't do a good job articulating what the ultimate solution was. And we didn't do a good job challenging, well, what about this? Or if this happens, or when it comes time to fixing this, what is that going to cost us? And ultimately, the uptime on it was just terrible. And that's just because the solution wasn't right for the problem.
It sounds like you didn't have a clear definition of what we call a project scope.
You got it. It's like, I mean, it's if you can't accurately define the problem, don't be surprised when you can't come up with the correct solution. And we just kind of got over our skis. And I love when people get excited about stuff. And it's like, don't pull the reins back. Let people go. But
passion is hard hard to ingest. So
It
when you
it
get
is.
you don't want to stifle it.
You don't. You don't. And it was one of those that it was tough. And man, I talk about going back with your tail between your legs, and I just knew, well, there goes every automation project I'm ever like. It's going to be no from here on. But as manufacturers, especially, we're used like nothing ever goes perfect.
Right.
I mean, if it was easy, everybody would be doing
That's
it.
right.
I think that is one thing is when you look at industry, like we're used to kind of getting punched around a little bit, and we stand back and we come back stronger.
That's
and so we learned so much from that process, and the processes that we built to basically keep that from happening paid itself off, especially as we started doing significantly bigger projects. Luckily, we kind of messed up on a smaller project. Another reason to start small.
That's a good one.
Much smaller room for error. And so, it did not go good. But it's like, what went wrong? How do we put a process in place to make sure we don't do this again? We can't be afraid to challenge what is being told to us. Our vendors are coming in, and if we ain't giving them the right information, we've got to be really confident that we don't just sign off on the first thing that gets sent to us. And phased approaches absolutely could be one of those solutions. And so, it wasn't great, but it didn't stop us.
Yeah.
I mean, we couldn't let just that one thing, we're never going to do this again. It's like, okay, what did we learn? How do we prevent it? Let's take another run at it. And ultimately, it kind of went to the back burner because we had some others that were a little easier. We almost kind of went, let's go pick up some easier ones. And part of that is, again, I think it's a journey, and I think it felt like a destination to us at that point. And we just felt like we had to get there now.
Yeah.
And you don't. Just keep making those steady incremental improvements. Work at whatever pace the organization can handle, what your floor can handle, what your staff can handle, what maintenance can handle, all those things. You don't want to just overload the system and fix one problem and create 10 others.
10 others, I always say, chop wood, carry water.
Yeah.
Right? Just chop wood, carry water.
Yep.
People often in organizations are searching for lightning bolts.
Yeah.
And one of the things I heard John Maxwell say one day, people need to stop searching for lightning bolts.
Yep.
And it sounds like that was a project that looked like a lightning bolt in a bottle, and it wasn't, and it hurt you. So you didn't win, but you learned.
But we learned, and that's all it is. I call it it's training. It's not failing, it's training.
That's the thing. We got to have grace with ourselves sometimes.
We do.
But, well, hey, I want to thank you for coming in here today. You've added tremendous value to our viewers. A lot of value to me. I always learn something every time I sit here and have these conversations.
I appreciate it for sure
with you. And here at Classy Llama, we would love to continue to go on the journey, the conversation with you. If you have anything we can help you with, feel free to reach out. There'd be a contact form here after this video that you can click on and learn more. But we would love to help you. Just have a conversation and begin your journey. Thank you very much, Carl, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you being
always
in here.
Appreciate it.
We'll see you all next month in our next conversation. Till then, have a great night.